In the days when Israel was divided and the land was often troubled by enemies and hardship, there arose a prophet named Elisha, whose life was a testament to God's miraculous power, divine provision, and unwavering mercy. His story begins in humble circumstances, but through faith and obedience, he became one of the greatest prophets in Israel's history, performing miracles that revealed God's sovereignty over nature, life, death, and the hearts of men. Elisha's journey into prophecy was not planned by human design but was divinely initiated. He was born into a modest family in Abel Mahola, a small village in Israel. His name, meaning God is salvation, foreshadowed the great work God had in store for him. From a young age, Elisha was a simple man, working in the fields alongside his father, plowing with oxen. Life was quiet and unassuming, but the call of God was about to change everything. One day, as Elisha was tending the oxen, the prophet Elijah, a fierce and mighty servant of God, passed by. Elijah saw in Elisha a heart willing to serve and follow God's calling. Without hesitation, Elijah took his cloak and cast it over Elisha, a symbolic act representing the transfer of prophetic authority. This moment marked the beginning of Elisha's divine mission. Elisha immediately left his oxen, slaughtered them, and used the plowing equipment to cook a meal for his family, demonstrating his total commitment to following Elijah. From that day, Elisha became Elijah's disciple, walking faithfully in his footsteps. He learned to hear God's voice, to trust in divine power, and to serve with humility and courage. Elijah and Elisha's relationship was a profound mentorship, and Elisha's faith was tested and strengthened as he watched Elijah perform mighty acts of God. Yet, the most remarkable part of Elisha's journey was yet to come. When Elijah's earthly ministry was nearing its end, Elisha refused to leave his master's side. He knew that Elijah's departure was imminent and desired a double portion of Elijah's spirit, asking for a greater measure of God's power to continue the work. Elijah agreed, but only if Elisha saw him being taken up into heaven. As they journeyed to the Jordan River, Elijah took his mantle, struck the water, and parted the waters so they could cross on dry ground. Elisha followed closely, eager to receive a divine blessing. Suddenly, as they crossed, a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated them. Elijah was taken up into heaven in a whirlwind, leaving behind his cloak. Elisha saw this awe-inspiring event and cried out, "My father, my father! The chariot of Israel and its horsemen!" As Elijah was taken, his mantle fell into the water. Elisha picked it up, understanding that he now carried the divine authority Elijah once had. With great faith, Elisha returned to the Jordan River. He struck the water with Elijah's mantle, and the waters parted once again. The prophets watching from afar recognized that the spirit of Elijah now rested upon Elisha, affirming his new role as God's chosen prophet for Israel. Elisha's prophetic ministry was marked by numerous miracles that displayed God's power and compassion. His first public act took place in Jericho, where the water supply was bitter and causing sickness. Elisha requested a bowl of salt and threw it into the spring, declaring that God had healed the waters. Immediately, the water was purified, and the land became fruitful. This miracle demonstrated that God's power could bring life and renewal to even the most desolate places. Soon after, Elisha encountered a group of boys mocking him, calling him baldhead. Their disrespect for God's prophet provoked divine judgment. Elisha cursed them, and 2 bears emerged from the woods, mauling 42 of the boys. This sobering event reminded everyone of the reverence owed to God's messengers and the seriousness of mocking God's servants. One of the most heartfelt miracles involved a poor widow in desperate circumstances. Her husband had died, leaving her in debt, and creditors threatened to take her sons as slaves to pay the debt. Elisha inquired what she possessed, and she replied only a small jar of oil. Elisha instructed her to borrow empty vessels from her neighbors and pour oil into them. Miraculously, the oil kept flowing until all vessels were full. She sold the oil, paid her debts, and saved her sons. This act revealed God's compassionate provision and his power to turn a little into much. In the town of Shunem, a wealthy woman showed great hospitality to Elisha, providing him with a room whenever he visited. Moved by her kindness and recognizing her faithfulness, Elisha prophesied that she would have a son. True to his word, she bore a boy. However, tragedy struck when the child suddenly died. Filled with grief but trusting in God's power, she sought out Elisha. The prophet returned with her, prayed over the boy, and by God's mercy, the child was restored to life. This miracle demonstrated that God's mercy is available to those who trust Him, even in the darkest moments. During a time of famine, Elisha performed a miracle to feed many. The prophets gathered and prepared a stew, but unknowingly, someone added poisonous goods. As people began to eat, they cried out that there was death in the pot. Calmly, Elisha threw some flour into the stew, neutralizing the poison and making it safe. This act showed that God's power can bring life even from death and that His provision extends into every detail of daily living. In another instance, a man brought Elisha 20 loaves of barley bread. Despite their small quantity, Elisha instructed his servant to feed the crowd. Doubtful, the servant hesitated, but Elisha declared that God's promise was sure. Miraculously, the bread multiplied, satisfying everyone with leftovers, foreshadowing God's abundant provision and illustrating that even the smallest offerings when given in faith can meet great needs. One of the most famous miracles involved Naaman, a Syrian commander suffering from leprosy. Hearing of Elisha's power, Naaman traveled to Israel seeking healing. Elisha sent a messenger to tell him to wash 7 times in the Jordan River. Naaman was initially offended by the simplicity of the command, expecting a grand display of power. But his servants urged him to obey. Humbling himself, Naaman dipped in the Jordan 7 times and was healed. His skin became as pure as a child's, and he recognized that the true God was Israel's God. Naaman's healing revealed that obedience and humility are essential to receiving God's blessings and that God's mercy extends beyond Israel to all nations. Elisha's miracles weren't limited to healings and provision, he also demonstrated God's sovereignty over nature. When an iron axe head fell into the Jordan River, a man who had borrowed it was distressed. Elisha calmly threw a stick into the water, and the iron floated to the surface. This simple yet astonishing act showed God's power to intervene even in the smallest details of life. The prophet's divine protection was also evident when enemies plotted to capture him. The king of Aram sent an army to seize Elisha in the city of Dothan. Elisha's servant was terrified at the sight of the surrounding army, but Elisha prayed that his eyes be opened. Instantly, the servant saw the hills filled with chariots and horses of fire, God's heavenly army. Elisha then prayed that the enemy be struck with blindness, leading them right into the heart of Israel's camp. When their sight was restored, the enemy was surrounded, but Elisha spared their lives, demonstrating God's mercy even toward enemies. Despite his miracles and divine protection, Elisha faced great hardship. The siege of Samaria by the Aramean army caused a severe famine. People resorted to cannibalism, and the king of Israel blamed Elisha for the crisis. The prophet prophesied that the famine would end within a day. That night, the enemy army fled in terror, leaving behind their supplies. When the Israelites plundered the camp, the famine was miraculously lifted, confirming Elisha's prophecy and God's power to bring relief at the perfect moment. Years later, the story of the Shunammite woman who had a son through Elisha's prophecy came to a tragic test. During a famine, she left her land to seek refuge, but upon her return, she found her property taken. She went to the king, pleading for justice. Coincidentally, Gatti, Elisha's servant, was telling the king about Elisha's miracles, including the resurrection of her son. Moved by her story, the king ordered her land and all its produce returned, once again showing how God's favor manifests at the right time. Elisha's divine missions extended even further. In Damascus, King Ben-Hadad of Aram lay ill. The king sent his servant Hazael to ask Elisha if he would recover. Elisha, seeing the suffering in Hazael's eyes, foretold that the king would die and that Hazael himself would rise to power the next day. True to the prophecy, Hazael assassinated the king and assumed the throne, fulfilling God's judgment. Elisha also anointed Jehu, a commander in Israel's army, as king to end the wicked reign of Ahab and Jezebel. When Jehu arrived in Jezreel, Jezebel mocked him from her window. In response, Jehu called her servants, who threw her down, fulfilling Elijah's prophecy of her downfall. Her body was trampled by horses, and only her skull, feet, and hands remained. The dogs devoured her, symbolizing divine justice. As the years advanced, Elisha's health declined. Before his death, the king of Israel came to him in anxiety about the future. Elisha, in his last act of prophetic authority, instructed the king to shoot an arrow out of the window, symbolizing victory over enemies. The king struck the ground 3 times, but Elisha was disappointed because he wished he had more fervently struck the ground. Because he only struck 3 times, Israel's victories over Aram would be limited. Even after Elisha's death, God's power was not confined. During a burial, some men hastily threw a dead man's body into Elisha's tomb. When the body touched Elisha's bones, the man came back to life and stood on his feet. This final miracle proved that God's power in Elisha's life was everlasting and that his divine presence transcended even death. The life of Elisha teaches us profound lessons about faith, obedience, compassion, and divine sovereignty. His miracles show that God is able to do exceedingly abundantly beyond what we can ask or imagine. Whether in small acts or monumental events, God's power is always present for those who trust and serve Him wholeheartedly. Elisha's story encourages us to trust in God's provision during times of need, to respect His messengers, and to walk humbly before Him. His life was a continuous testament that nothing is impossible with God, that divine power is accessible through faith, and that God's compassion is always near. As we reflect on Elisha's journey, let us remember that God calls each of us to serve Him with faith and humility. Just as Elisha performed miracles through God's power, we too can witness His divine hand in our lives, whether through acts of kindness, moments of provision, or standing firm in faith amidst challenges. We invite you to like this video, comment below about what part of Elisha's story touched you the most, and share this message with your family, friends, and church community. Let us spread the word of God's power and love to everyone around us. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring biblical stories, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Join us in trusting God's everlasting power, and remember, with Him, nothing is impossible. Thank you for journeying with us through the incredible life of Elisha. May his faith inspire you to trust in God's divine purpose for your life. Until next time, keep walking in faith, trusting in God's miracles, and sharing His love with all.